Om Sthapakaya cha dharmasya sarvadharmaswarupini avatar varishtaya Ramakrishnaya te namaha Sudhismriti purananam alayam karunalayam namami bhagavat padam Shankaram Shankaram.
Swami,
Yeah.
can you tell us the verses? As
Oh, yeah, I will just.
Thank you.
So, as you know, this text contains 585 verses, mostly in the form of a dialogue, but it also contains some introductory remarks by the author. We have already finished 2 sessions, so we are continuing. First, the author, Shankaracharya, glorified human life, because he says to be born as a human being itself is a unique privilege, spiritually speaking, because only human beings can reach the highest spiritual realization. And then he discussed the essential characteristics of a spiritual seeker, the general characteristics and the specific characteristics. General characteristics are this: that one should have a purified intellect. Medhavi purusho vidvad uha boha vijakshanaha adhikari atma vidyaya uttalakshana lakshitaha. So it's a very interesting discussion. He says, we use our intelligence to study material subjects. We have not yet reached the verse. So I will give the number of the verses that we are going to discuss today. This is only introduction. So he says, Shankaracharya says, our ordinary human intelligence is okay for understanding secular subjects, non-spiritual academic subjects like physics, chemistry, mathematics, all that we can learn through our normal intelligence, what we call IQ or intellect, so to speak. But the most brilliant philosopher, academician or a mathematician or a physicist may not be able to grasp the inner implications of certain important spiritual statements that you find in scriptures. That's a very wonderful observation. See, we are able to grasp only those ideas when the vibrations or frequency of our intellect and those ideas are more or less on the same level. If there is the slightest disconnect, you won't be able to understand. Even if you try to understand, we feel fatigue or bored. We feel boredom. So he says, Medhavi. Medha is a kind of purified, enlightened intellect. It not only grasps, understands, and also retains ideas, but also it has the unique ability to go deeper into the spiritual implications of certain important scriptural statements. And that faculty is called Medha, refined or purified, processed intellect. You can very easily verify where we stand in this particular aspect. See, if we feel at home, if we feel a kind of inner harmony, when we try to understand some higher abstract spiritual ideas, then what it means is that our intellect is pure. One classic example I can give from Sri Ramakrishna tradition. One of Sri Ramakrishna's monastic disciples, Swami Advaita, he was not a highly educated man in the academic sense, not at all. And it was Sri Ramakrishna who actually taught him the alphabet, the elements of even ordinary conversational language. But when Swamiji was reading some very abstract verses from the Upanishads, Kathopanishads, which this person would not have read, immediately he said, yes, it is true. Now, where did he get that inner harmony? Immediately he connected with that idea. Now I am not sure if Einstein or Newton or Max Planck will be able to connect the way a Swami Advaita could connect with an abstract spiritual idea. So what does it mean? So that particular faculty is called Medha. So Dhir Dharana Shakti. So it not only enables you to understand, but it enables you to feel harmony with that idea and to enjoy when you are in the company of those ideas. You feel at home. That faculty is Medhavi. So that is the first qualification that Shankaracharya puts forward for those who want to study scriptures. For the simple reason, when we study these scriptures, we are actually connecting with ideas that we normally do not encounter in our everyday life. And not only that, it is, if you are not interested, you feel terribly exhausted.
Yeah.
If you read Critique of Pure Reason even, you'll be terribly fatigued unless you have a specific interest in Kantian philosophy. So, Medhavi, so then he says another very important faculty, there are many, which are general characteristics for those who want to study scriptures. The second most important is Uha Poka Vichakshana. See, Uha means logically analyzing an idea and the ability to understand, accept and observe what is appropriate. Apoha means is the opposite. The ability to filter out, to reject mentally what is inappropriate. And this is very, very important in spiritual life. Very, very important. Because every moment, every day, every second, our mind is exposed to a number of multiple ideas, not always very pleasant or desirable, very often undesirable ideas. So, he says, if your intellect is purified, then it will evolve a kind of inner filtering mechanism. That mechanism will automatically filter out all wrong ideas, it's called apoha, and will automatically observe and understand and receive and accept what is appropriate. So these are two very important characteristics, general characteristics for all spiritual seekers in all traditions everywhere. Then he speaks of 4 specific characteristics, which he calls sadhana chadushtayam, which means 4 important qualifications, 4 important preliminary conditions for being able to study Vedanta. One is a sense of discerning wisdom as to what is real, what really matters, what really counts. That is called nitya. In the broader sense, it means everlasting, what really matters. In the specific metaphysical sense, it means that which remains unchanging in the past, present and future, that which is permanent, that which is experienced the same way in waking, dream and deep sleep states, and that which is never born because it always exists, it never dies because it always exists, it never grows or evolves or decays because it never undergoes any change. That is Brahman only, that is Nitya. Once you understand that, then with this the purified intellect will be able to reject what is anitya, what is impermanent, what is actually not to be taken as everlasting, what is to be discarded. And once we reach this point, then we will have a sense of renunciation or giving up or discarding what is transient, impermanent, and then we will have no desire for sensual pleasures. And along with that comes sense control, restraining mind, concentration, a sense of sacredness or sanctity of higher ideas, and naturally concentration. And when these 3 factors combine, then naturally you will have only one desire, to get out of this impermanent, transient world of sensory pleasures. That's called mumukshutvam, or desire for liberation. So first, a discerning wisdom that accepts what is real and that rejects what is unreal. Then a sense of renunciation, and then sense control, restraining of mind, faith, etc. Samadhi, sakta, sampatti means satka means 6. We already discussed yesterday. And then desire for liberation, moksha. These are specific qualifications for all spiritual seekers. Now, the 51st verse, those who are interested, is a text, is the 51st verse. That is a very important verse of this particular text. Because here the student is putting certain questions to the teacher, 7 questions, of which 2 questions are very, very important. First, that is, what is atman, what is that which is not atman? Non-atman is not mentioned. What is atman, what is that which need not be considered to be atman? So the verse is, Ko nama bandhak kathamesha agataha, katham pradishthasya katham vimokshaha, koso anatma paramakka atma, tayor viveka kathameda tuchyata. Please tell me, please discuss, please explain. What are the questions? What is bondage? How did this bondage arise? How does it continue to exist? How to get out of this? And what is that which is not Atman? And then what is the Atman? Then how to distinguish between these two? Please explain. So, the first response for the teacher is, first of all, he praises the questioner. It is not a kind of just blind, theology, but it just, the teacher says, it's not easy for anyone to be able to put such a question. They can ask questions about things that may benefit us in our everyday life. So only those who are highly evolved can put such questions. So dhanyosi krutakrityosi pavidam te kulam toya yada vidya bandhamuktya brahmabhavidi michasi. First of all, he says, your family is blessed. The people among whom you are born is blessed, are blessed. Your parents are blessed, because you are born in such a family. Kulam pavitram janini kudartha. So the place, your community, your society, where you are born is blessed. Because in fact, the presence of a great spiritual seeker will be felt for 14 succeeding generations. That is general belief. Because see, first of all, what prevents us from doing something wrong in traditional conservative families? My father would not approve of this. My grandfather would not have done this. Or it may bring bad name to my family, my tradition. So that is what actually prevents us from doing something which may be inappropriate. Which means we identify ourselves with the actions and activities of our distant ancestors. Now, if a great man or woman is born in your family, whom you remember, who may have enriched your spiritual, cultural heritage, and if you are proud of it, only you should be proud of it. If it disown our roots, it's no use. Just like if a tree disowns its own roots, it will die. If a branch of a tree disowns the tree itself, it will die. If a leaf disowns its own branch where it grows, it will die. So, that's why the teacher first of all congratulates this student. See, he says, you are blessed. Dhanyosi, you are blessed. And your family has become sacred and blessed. Kritya actually is a very wonderful word. It literally means you have become one who has done all duties. What it means is when we feel a stage in our life, we will feel, well, we have done what we ought to have done. We have done what we should have done. That state of mind gives us a tremendous sense of inner satisfaction and contentment and inner fulfillment and richness. That state is called Kridakrityada and Kridarthada. Both are the same. When we feel that we have done what we ought to have done, what should be done, or something that enriches our life. Now, and your family have been sanctified by your birth, because your family has given birth to somebody who could ask this question. After all, how many people will be able to move away from this biological flow of the cyclic rotation of being born in this world and spending all time and energy for enjoying material pleasures, and then dying and reborn again and continuing this cycle, a wheel, when you rotate along with the wheel, you never come out of it. That's the difference between a wheel and a straight line. A straight line, you can come out of it, but a wheel, you don't come out of it. So those who reach this state of spiritual or even cultural maturity will ask the question, what's the meaning of life? What is bondage? What is my true nature? Is life nothing but a journey, a movement from birth, from cradle to a piece of stone in the cemetery? Or is the journey coming to an end when the body is pushed through the tube in the crematorium? Or is something beyond that? So that question could be raised only by a person whose birth becomes a blessing to the family and to the heritage, the lineage where he is born. Now this question continues. In fact, the teacher goes on praising this student, which I am not going to discuss, because the reason is he wants to convince the student that he has stumbled upon a great spiritual privilege, whether consciously or unconsciously. He has done something which will make him and his family and this community proud and sacred. And this when a kulam pavitra means sanctified or sacred. That's what it means. The whole family, community becomes sacred where such a person is born. Because if not now, after some time, he will be remembered. A great man, a great woman, the influence of such a person, a spiritual teacher, will remain. Even the thoughts, ideas, vibrations, all will remain and will be felt by people who come after him. So he says, you have become extremely blessed. Now we are coming to the beginning of the discussion. The teacher, just before answering the question, he makes one general statement. This is 71st verse. You have to remember, we have 585 verses, so we have to skip over many verses. This is 71st one. Yeah. The 71st one is Mokshasya hetu prathamo nigatyade vairagyam atyanta manitya vastushu tadaschyamaschapi damas titiksha nyasa prasatha khila karmanam prisham. Simple statement. The means, the path leading to moksha is detachment or non-attachment, or detachment from all that is impermanent. So, once we develop a kind of detachment, an aversion for all that is impermanent, then mind will automatically look for something which is not impermanent, which is permanent. Or rather, in fact, the natural process of the mind is that it should move towards one direction, then it will automatically move away from its opposite direction. So, in fact, that's why the teacher says the ability to read and understand and retain and contemplate upon higher spiritual ideas is the first qualification for any spiritual seeker. The first general qualification, Medhavi Purusho Vidwan. Medha means this purified intellect. When this purified intellect develops, we will automatically will go for something that is sustaining, that is everlasting, that is of a more permanent value in our life. In fact, our set of priorities will change. So it's called a kind of reprioritization. All of us have priorities. To begin with, one may combine spiritual values and secular values together, giving equal space and importance to both. That's how we begin, continuing both. But as we evolve, we shift, there's a paradigm shift taking place. We shift the emphasis more towards the higher spiritual values, and proportionately there is a reprioritization, a change of priorities taking place. Not that we leave anything arbitrarily behind. We do not and we cannot leave anything arbitrarily behind. We cannot reject that way. See, tomorrow onwards, I won't see any movies. If we take such a decision, mind will not cooperate. We may not see a movie, but mind will be speculating, thinking about the problem of not seeing movies, or maybe, or also mind will re-experience the previous experiences, which is not qualitatively different from seeing directly. So what happens is, mind should move towards a higher ideal, and proportionately it will move away from a lower ideal. We do not arbitrarily move away from a lower ideal, rather we move towards a higher ideal, and that happens when we take a decision. In fact, this is an easier process, because when we arbitrarily take a decision to move away from something, our intellect, our will, or our decision-making faculty may cooperate. My mind will not cooperate. But on the other hand, when we try to move towards something higher, then mind will automatically give more importance to these higher values. So priorities undergo a paradigm shift. So that's what happens. So his mokshasya prathamo hetu, the first important means and method for liberation is detachment from all impermanent things. But remember, that is the way it is put. But this detachment is nothing but trying to attach ourselves to a higher spiritual value. That comes later on. In fact, when the author discusses the importance of scriptural reading, he says, scriptural reading is the first, or as I mentioned, the ability to enjoy the company of holy men or holy women by reading ideas coming from them is the first step. And then once we turn our mind towards a higher value, then automatically sense control, self-restraint, all will come. It is something very interesting. The samadhi shakka sampatti, what do you call, restraining or moving away from external objects, or detachment, and then titiksha, that is endurance, concentration, Shraddha, faith, sense control, mind control, all these are stated in the list Samadhi, Satka, Sampatti as a third specific qualification. But actually what happens is, once we turn our mind to this higher value, then this automatically develops. We don't have to work hard. That's an interesting thing from a psychological point of view.
Right.
So once we can get mad with say higher idea, then mind will automatically develop this detachment, self-control, everything. Because ideas will color our attitude. So all these qualities will develop. Now slowly the teacher directly confronts the questions. So what was the first question we should remember? The first question is this: Ko nama bandha kathamesha agataha. What is bondage? How this bondage came? How do we continue in this bondage? These are three questions. Bondage can be a no answer, really speaking. So that becomes clear. When did the rope become the snake? Actually, the rope never became the snake. There is a rope lying on the floor. There is not enough light. We mistake that rope for a snake. So when the light comes, we realize it is only a piece of rope. So if you ask the question, where did the snake, where did it go away? Where did it disappear? What happened to the snake? We don't ask the question. So when did the snake originate? When did it come to the room? The question becomes irrelevant. So once we turn our attention to higher spiritual values, these questions become self-answered. All these questions will be answered. But technically, Shankaracharya says, the reason for bondage is that we identify ourselves with what we actually are not. We identify ourselves with this body, with this mind, feelings, emotions, tendencies, impressions, and so on. When something makes us angry, we identify ourselves with that object. When we don't get that object, that experience makes us angry because we identify ourselves with that person, with that entity. We did not get that object. So that's what happens. In body, mind, complex, feelings, emotions, and so on. So we identify ourselves with what is really not atman. It's called anatman. So that's why the author takes up the first question. What is non-atman? What is the unreality? What do we mistake for atman, which is really not atman? So we can perhaps very logically think of this. When we have a wound in our, let's say in our shoulder or our head, we feel I'm hurt or I'm feeling the pain. The I here stands for the body. When we feel I'm angry, I'm thirsty, I'm happy or unhappy, then it's not the body, it's the mind. And also, in certain cases, it could be what we call pancha pranas, the vital energies. That's what we identify ourselves with. So, but then sometimes you say, my mind, my intellect, the possessive case, who is the I there? It should be something other than the mind, the intellect or anything. It should not be intellect or mind. So what is that I? The I is Atman. So we can find this in regular life. But still, in normal circumstances, we all identify ourselves with this body or with this mind, with this intellect. When we are unhappy, we identify ourselves with this mind. When we get bored by reading a book, we identify ourselves with the intellect. But there are cases when we identify also with something, though unconsciously we are not aware of it. So the first question that the teacher takes up is, what is non-atman? What is the impermanent? What is the unreal? So that's the first question. The simple answer is, anatman consists of three important components. It's called, in Sanskrit, it's called sthula-sharira, sukshma-sharira, linga-sharira, another word is karana-sharira. Sthula-sharira is the physical body. Sukshma-sharira, it contains everything. It's what is our personality. We are going to discuss elaborately on these subjects. And karana-sharira is avidya, maya or ignorance. So these three constitute non-atman. People at various levels identify themselves with these various aspects of non-atman or anatman. So first discussion is, what is sthula-sharira, what is gross body? We all know very well, but Shankaracharya puts it in his own language. The verse is 89th verse of the, yes, 89th verse. 89th verse. So the verse is this: Tuk mamsa ruthira snayu medu majjasti sankulam purnam mutra purishabhyam sthulam nindyamidam vapuh. So this gross body, first of all, he calls it despicable. So this should be understood very clearly. In Vedanta and also in Indian philosophy, there are two approaches with the human body. Human body is the most sublime thing if we can use it to transcend itself. The body is needed for us to take up the spiritual journey that takes us beyond body consciousness. That's why, surprisingly, you find you are very healthy when you are not aware of your body. If you have a headache or pain or rheumatic or some pain or something, the body is reminding you of its presence. I am here. So you go to a doctor. But suppose the body doesn't remind you of its own presence, you don't go to a doctor. That is true of mind also. When mind becomes anxious or neurotic or any kind of problems, then only we become aware of such a thing as mind. That's why physical problems, medical problem, which at the physical level will have some solution at psychological level or intellectual level. Think of a man like that British
Stephen Hawking.
Stephen Hawking. He didn't have a very wonderful human body. But he was so obsessed with his scientific research, futurological scientific discoveries, theories. So he enjoyed life, though his body was not something that helped him to enjoy life. So when he transcended body, consciously or unconsciously, not through yogi means by compulsions or circumstances at least, he could actually forget or transcend the problems of body. But then, I don't think perhaps he had reached the level of transcending psychologically. Now, mind also becomes very healthy when you transcend mind. When you link mind to something other than mind, that goes beyond mind, the non-mind, the atman, the mind also becomes healthy. That's why the name, the sthita prajna yasya saha. That's a name given in Bhagavad Gita, 2nd chapter. For a spiritually illumined person is called sthita prajna. His prajna, his intellect, his mind, his sthita means perfectly calm and quiet, in equilibrium, because he has linked it to atman. Now, so body can be a wonderful instrument for a sensible person, because the instrument can be used for thinking, reading, contemplation, savana, manana, for all these purposes, body is needed. So it's very important. But body by itself is not a very wonderful thing. If you look into the contents of the bag of skin, there is nothing much to write home about. So Shankaracharya has got a language which may not be very pleasant, but I shall read it. Or I can just translate that into English. So this gross body, this sthula-sharira, it is nindyam, idam nindyam, it is very despicable. Absolutely not a very wonderful thing to carry. Because when you open the skin back, then what does it contain? It consists of skin, behind the skin, flesh, blood vessels, fat, marrow, bones, and so many things. Why this is mentioned in this strong language? In fact, in other Mandukya Karika and other commentaries, Upanishad commentaries, there are long paragraphs describing what an absolutely abhorrent, terrible thing this body is. But then after convincing the student of the absolutely despicable nature of this bag of skin, then he says how this body can be used to transcend itself. So there is a very interesting passage in the Chandogya Upanishad commentary. It says, you are riding a horse, and the horse is heading towards a precipice or maybe a piece of rock. Now, how do you save yourself? By giving a new direction to the horse. You don't jump out of the horse. Sitting on the horse, you make use of the reins in your hands, and by giving a proper direction to the horse, you force it to move in a different direction, so it doesn't take you over a precipice. So body is like a horse. It can be used. That's why Sharira Madhyam Khalu Dharma Sadhana. That's the meaning. It comes in the Kalidasa's classic is called Kumara Sambhava. The fifth sarga, fifth section, those who are interested, fifth chapter, this is a verse. So the verse is very interesting, and that will give you an idea of the greatness of human body when it is used as a means to transcend itself, and also its despicable nature when you consider body itself as the ultimate goal, as the ultimate destination. How despicable it is. Otherwise, it is a glorious instrument in our hands so that we can use it to transcend body consciousness itself. So the story is this. Uma was Parvati. Uma was doing tapasya. She wanted to realize Shiva. And so Shiva wanted to test her devotion. So she was going through terrible austerities. Daily bath, meditation, puja and so on. She wanted to realize Shiva, the Lord of wisdom, Lord of dissolution, Lord of wisdom, spiritual knowledge. So Shiva wanted to test her devotion. A great message is put in the language of a mythological story. So Shiva took the form of a mendicant and appeared before her and asked her a question. See, you are doing all these terrible ascetic practices, austerities. Are you doing all this by your own power? By the way, do you have enough water to take bath, ablutions every day? Do you get enough food? You are getting so emaciated. Apikriyartham sulabham samit kusam jalani visnani titiksha api sasaktya tapasi pravartase sharira madhyam khalu dharma sadhanam. The last statement is relevant here. So 2 lines. Do you have enough water, enough requirements, everything for your ablution, rituals, practices, puja, worship and so on? Are you undertaking these terrible austerities by your own power, your own self-confidence? And then Shiva wants to test her devotion. You are punishing your own body through this over-asceticism, austerities. Sharira madhyam khalu dharma sad. Sharira means this body. Adya means mukhyam. Mallinatha, the commentator of Kalidasa's works, it's called Sanjeevani commentary. He says, Adya means mukhyam. Sadhana means instrument. So this body is the most important instrument in your hands. This body is the most powerful, the most effective instrument in your own hands and to use it properly. But in order to be able to use body properly, you should stop considering body as the most wonderful thing in this world. Then you will be able to go beyond it. So that's the message. So that body is sthula-sharira. Now this sthula-sharira, it is what experiences everything in this world during waking state. It is the experiencer, it is the seer, it is the perceiver of all objects, experiences during waking state. It experiences everything at a gross level. In Vedantic tradition, when people experiences things with their mainly by their external senses, that experience is called gross experience. When they experience only through mind, it is called subtle. So, the teacher tells the student, the first component of non-atman, the unreal, the impermanent, the transient, is this gross body. And that's what people mostly identify themselves with. When they identify themselves with the gross body, then they think they are nothing but this physical body. In India, in ancient India, there was a school called Charvaka, with Indian materialists. So they believed that whatever you see during waking state with your external senses of perception alone is real. Everything else is unreal. So they were Indian cutthroat materialists, Indian materialism. So this is the first thing that you should consider to be the unreal, the impermanent, the transient, what is not Atman. Then the discussion continues. Next component is subtle body. That is, the subtle body is called sukshma-sharira, it is called. Sukshma means subtle. And that's a very important thing to understand. It's more difficult to understand. Sthula body is very obvious. So the verses are 98 and 99. 98 and 99. The author has already discussed gross body, because he repeats again and again, somehow you should be able to get out of this cycle of life, death and rebirth. Tasmat sarva prayatnena bhavabandhava vimuktaye sweneva yatna kartavyo rogadiriva pantidehi. So with all of your efforts you should try to get out of this cycle. For that we must first of all understand how we misinterpret ourselves to be what we actually are not. So that's the question. Vagadi pancha, saranadi pancha, pranadi pancha, pramukhani pancha, buddhya dhyavidyapi cha kama karmani puryastakam sukshma-shariram ahu. It's a very, very important. It is called Puryastakam. Astakam means 8. Puri means a city or a unit or a community, or can be called Puri. Many Indian cities are called Puri. So Puri means a community, a settlement, sometimes a city with a fortress around. Now there are 8 fortresses, 8 cities, 8 units. What are they? First one, 5 senses of perception. Jnanendriya. That is, this sense of sight, sense of hearing, sense of smell, sense of taste, sense of touch. All these 5 senses. When we see something, our mind and eyes go together and focus on a visual object. The visual object comes to the mind, and then the mind identifies itself with that visual object. That's why this is very simple. Or audio object. When a painter, for example, goes to an art gallery and he sees a painting, and evening he comes, if he's a very good, skillful, talented painter, he'll be able to paint a replica of that. Because his mind registers the form of that painting he has seen in the gallery. So the mind has to take the form of that. When the mind connects with that painting, the picture, through eyes, then the mind itself takes the form of that painting. And then it is retained in the chittam as a memory. Then he forgets, maybe for 10 hours. In the evening, he tries to paint something. Then what happens? The picture comes back. It is registered in the mental system. So also audio. Good musicians or good those who memorize things. You memorize something, maybe you memorized it 10 years back. And today you sing it. When you memorized, your mind takes the form of that the audio object at that time. But then it has already entered a vast accumulated reservoir of impressions and memories in the mental system called chittam. And then after some years, or maybe after some hours or days, you remember that song or that statement or whatever it is. You are able to do that because your mind goes through, mind actually walks back through memory line called tracks in the mental system. And then you reach that point where you heard it and you are able to recite it again. That's why, when you learn a poem in a musical manner, you are able to recite and remember more easily. But in the same poem, if you read as a prose, you are not able to recite so easily. Because when it becomes a musical component, then it creates a clear-cut track. So mind can travel backward in time and reach the point where you heard it. So what happens is, these 5 senses together become a part of human personality. And every time we identify ourselves with what we hear, what we see, what we touch, and so on. So that's the first one. And the second one is karmendriyas. That is the aggregate of all senses beginning with speech. Vagadi pancha. Which means our hands, feet, our vocal cords with which we speak, and all other senses with which we work, they also constitute one unit. The third one is pranadi pancha. Prana, apana, vyanodana, samana. The vital energies functioning and operating in 5 different directions. So that is prana. Prana actually is the energy source, its manifestations are prana, apana, vayana, udana, samana. So that's why prana healing, prana healing, going beyond these 5 bifurcations, multiplications, we are going to original vital energy. So when it is activated, many of the diseases can be cured. That's the theory. Anyway, so that's one thing. This is another unit that we often consider to be our true nature, which actually we are not. Bhudadi Pancha. That is all the 5 elements. So, Vayu, Agni, Rava, Prithvi, Prithvyamoshe, like that in the Upanishad stated there. Space, fire, water, earth, and matter, all these together constitute another unit. And then another unit is our internal organs, that is intellect. Intellect decides whether it is this or it is something else. Mind speculates. So when we see an object in front of us, it may resemble a human being, but there is not enough light. So we may miss. Actually, it is a stone pillar, but because there is not enough light, we may mistake that stone pillar to be the form of a human being. When we reach nearer, we come to know that it is actually a pillar of stone, made of stone, not a human form. But before we reach there, before our intellect decided it is not a human being, it is only a stone pillar, mind was speculating, sankalpa vikalpa atmika karna vrutti, whether it is a human being or something else, or a ghost or something, anything else. So the speculation comes to an end when you decide nischayatmika antakarna vrutti. Buddhi, intellect decides it is not a human being, it is stone pillar. Then suddenly you remember, oh yes, I saw the same thing last week. So for memory system, from chittam, the memory is brought back. It's a memory system. And then you identify, I am the one who saw it last week. So these are 4 elements, 4 components which constitute what is called antakarana or internal organs in Vedanta. It is called buddhi, mana, chittam and antakarana. Frequently they are taken together as one unit. And so very often we identify ourselves with the mind, or with intellect, or with what we recollect. So we may mistake ourselves to be what we experience with our senses of perception, or what we may experience with the sense of action, or what we remember, or what we speculate. All this happens. So all these are examples of what we actually are not. How we mistake with what we actually are not, with what is not our true nature. Then what is the cause of all this? Avidya. Avidya is nothing but superimposition. So avidya is, this is something to be understood. Avidya is explained as linga-sharira, as karana-sharira towards the end, you understand? But this avidya is a manifestation of the real great avidya, which is actually called karana-sharira. We will discuss later. So here avidya means superimposition. Instead of atman, we impose mind on our true nature. So remember, this is the 98th verse. Instead of atman, we superimpose mind on our true nature. Instead of atman, we superimpose with what we see as our true nature. Instead of atman, we superimpose with what we hear of our true nature. As I mentioned, when we hear something, for the time being, mind takes the form of that what we hear about. See, when we, for example, a car is making a sound from the street, if we listen to that with great concentration, then mind will naturally realize the fact of the existence of a car in the street. When that happens, mind will see that car. So for some time, mind will take the form of that car. Like that, when we see this glass, when we touch this glass with our hand, if we focus completely on that, the mind will immediately perceive the form of the glass. It takes that form. So, whatever our senses of perception and senses of action perceives or brings to our mind, mind becomes that for the moment. And after that moment, that experience is accumulated as an impression in the memory system, and that becomes chittam, which is one of the antakaranas, which is one of the memory systems. And that comes back to the mind again when we reconnect that experience again. When mind walks back through this track of memory line and going back maybe 10 years backward, and we reach the place where we saw that object and immediately we identify. So every moment, every second, we are identifying ourselves with what we actually are not. So now this superimposition of taking one for the other is called adhyasa in Vedanta. That adhyasa is the meaning of the word avidya in this particular verse. So that should be understood. Avidya has got a different meaning. It has got a more universal meaning. Avidya is the cause of the creation. Even the experience of this jagat, this world, is avidya. It's called maya. It is called, sometimes called avidya shakti. It's called prakriti. So that is different. But in this particular verse, in the 98th verse, avidya means adhyasa or superimposition. That should be understood. Otherwise there will be conflict in the total philosophical structure. Now, the seventh one is kama. Kama means desire. Without desire, this adhyasa superimposition won't happen. Yesterday we discussed shama, dama. See, when mind is not attached to anything, then even if you see an object, the visual image of that object will not reach the mind. It will reach a point between the eye and the mind. It is called the orb of the eye. So that's why it's called dama. We already discussed yesterday. So when a person develops detachment, he becomes free from desire. And when you are free from desire, then all these superimpositions will not happen. So the cause of that superimposition is desire. Desire is what connects us with these objects. If there is no desire, then there is no connecting link between the object and the mind. Now the last one is karma, action. Action done with a strong motive, desire. That will always create a desire, a residual effect that will cause adhyasa or superimposition, and that will cause this misidentification, wrong identification with all these different components which are really alien to our true nature, alien to atman. So this now next one is 99th verse, which is a continuation of the same definition. Idam shariram sunu sukshma-sharira lingattu apanjikrita bhuta sambhavam savasanam karma phalanubhavatam sajnanato anadi rupathiratmanaka. Now this, which actually called the subtle body, sukshma-sharira, is also known as linga-sharira. Actually, sukshma-sharira is our true personality. In a very gross, superficial, childish sense, we often consider the gross body as a personality. But we they may be in fashion parade, it may be true. Beyond that, our true personality, the persons we admire, we respect, we revere, are the subtle personalities of those persons. A man like Gandhi, he won't be considered for the role of a model for any fashion, but he was a great personality. It's just one classic example. Gandhi, whether you like him or not, there are many people who don't like him, or Lincoln, another example, coming closer home. Lincoln certainly won't be accepted for the role of a model for fashion, facial expressions. But one of his biographers wrote, you may remember, Lincoln as if his eyes were filled with unspilled tears, tears which are still remaining there, not falling down. You remember that statement in one of the classic biographies I read long back. So, do you consider Lincoln to be a very wonderful person if we interpret him as a sthula-sharira, gross body? Then what do we admire in a man like Lincoln, no Martin Luther? The subtle personality. Subtle personality means attitudes, behaviors, characteristics, tendencies, emotions, what he actually did, what he actually felt, what he actually spoke with sincerity. That's what we call sukshma-sharira. So sukshma-sharira, if you use the Sanskrit word sukshma-sharira or subtle body, it may appear to be very abstract. The simple translation is sukshma-sharira is the real personality of any person. It is the personality whom we remember after some time. After the person's body, physical, sthula-sharira, body is burnt to ashes, pushed to the crematorium. After centuries, you remember a person for what he did, for what he felt, what he taught, what he actually was for others, not for his family members, what he did for humanity. So that is the aggregate of all that he stood for, he lived for, he felt and taught and and experienced. It is called sukshma-sharira. And that sukshma-sharira, according to Vedanta, consists of 8 aggregates. That is the 5 elements, like the senses of senses of action, karmendriyas, speech, etc. Then the 5 made up of the senses of perception called hearing, then 5-fold breath, panchapranas, then 5 elements, and then intellect, mind, memory system, and the ego consciousness. And then, but these things are not enough, because that person should not be a Brahmajnani. Then you don't call him a sukshma-sharira. He may have a wonderful personality. He may not be known as, may not be liberated person, spiritually speaking. So even a very wonderful person with wonderful feelings and experiences and ideas may not be spiritually a liberated person. Because if he is spiritually liberated, there will be no adhyasa, no superimposition. And there will be no action, no desire. Even a desire for something noble is actually linked to imperfection in Vedanta. Even a desire to do wonderful things in the world is by itself as a sign of imperfection. But then those who are fully free, liberated from that desire will automatically do good things for others. That is different. But any good action for the good of the world, then for its own sake, is an imperfection. But the same actions done by a liberated person, which becomes his nature, second nature, to do good for others, it is different. So there is no avidya, kama, karma for such persons. So, This sukshma-sharira is operating in dream state. So that's what you remember. As I mentioned, sukshma-sharira is our real personality. The sukshma-sharira continues to exist from birth to birth, life to life. So when we do a good action, that action becomes a vritti, a residual element, an impression. It becomes a tendency, a samskara. It becomes a strong action-oriented tendency called a vasana. And that may prompt us to continue the same action. And that again goes on accumulating tendencies and impressions in our system. And we are born again, now with this body. So question may naturally arise. Here it is mentioned, for example, you say, listen, the 5 senses of perception, 5 senses of action, and 5 elements, all this. They are part of the subtle personality of sukshma-sharira. The sukshma-sharira doesn't die when the physical body is destroyed. Then how do we inherit tendencies and impressions from previous life? The eyes with which you perceive things, with which you created impressions are gone when this body is gone. When you are born again, the impressions created by the eye contact in this life are born with you. So how does it happen? So we have to remember, whatever the indriyas, whatever impressions the indriyas bring to our mind, they become part of this inner subtle personality. Even when those indriyas are gone, physical dimension of those indriyas, those senses are gone, when we are born again with those indriyas, those tendencies will start functioning through the same indriyas. In other words, to give a simple example, suppose a person has seen wonderful things in this life, to give an example, and those visual experiences have enriched his mind with good samskaras, good impressions. And after his death, when he is born again, these eyes are no more there. But what these eyes brought in this life are stored up somewhere, not in the physical body. And that storehouse is part of the sukshma-sharira. So when that person is born again as a baby, he will have eyes. With those eyes, he will have a tendency to see those objects which he has seen in this life. That's why when we go to a place, when people sometimes go to places, let us spiritually important places, relevant people, when you go to a holy place, maybe for the first time, we feel at home. We feel as if we belong there, the place belongs to us. This feeling comes not because with these eyes you have seen that place in this life, no. But in previous life, with the eyes of your previous body, you have seen such identical places which created good samskaras, and those samskaras are not destroyed when the previous body fell. But those samskaras are born again when you have got eyes with the same, with these eyes, those samskaras will manifest. So Lord Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Tatradam buddhi samyogam labhade pavodekikam yadadecha tato bhuya samsiddhu kurunandana purvabhyasena denaiva kriyade kyavasopi saka jijñasiravi yogasya sabda brahmadi vartade. I shall try to explain this. Each come to 6th chapter. The meaning is this. Arjuna puts one question to Krishna. See, I do a lot of spiritual practices. Suppose we die without reaching our goal. If everything gone, Krishna says no. Nothing will be lost and you are never dead. He says, When you are born again, Buddhism yoga means this subtle body. The buddhi is an important part of the subtle body. You should remember very well, antakarana. Buddhi or antakarana or chittam has already accumulated vast storehouse of good samskaras. When you are born again, with these samskaras, when you are walking in front of a holy place or meditation somewhere, you feel a natural urge to step into that place. Your friend may be different. Your friend may, I will better go to somewhere else, 49ers play. But you feel at home in this meditation hall. You know, Sri Ramakrishna's life, all sorts of people used to come to Sri Ramakrishna. Some of them were great spiritual seekers, some of them were just laughers. So, when some good devotees came to Sri Ramakrishna, they will sit in front of him and they will listen to what he is teaching. And some fellow sitting behind will tap at the back. Let us go and have it. It's a wonderful garden, flowers. Let us go and see. So Sri Ramakrishna knew. So you go and have. Why don't you go and have a walk in the garden?
Yeah.
Let these fellows sit there and listen to him. Because you may belong to the same family. Biological, genetic, heredity or lineage has nothing at all. Because we are all independent, solitary spiritual pilgrims, traveling from one life to another life. So this sukshma-sharira is what we inherit. That's why tendencies, impressions, attitudes and behavior patterns of children, the same family, going to the same school, the same parentage, will be different. So, and here the author say, idam shariram sukshma sankidam, lingatva abanjikata bhuta sambhavam, etc. So already we discussed this. So this is another aspect of what we actually are not in our true nature, anatman. That's mentioned here. Okay, we will have discussion now and we'll continue this discussion tomorrow.
Sabji, so the question, between two births, we have this sukshma-sharira, as you said.
Yeah.
Now, is it possible to continue the spiritual practices in sukshma-sharira? Like somebody was used to doing japa when he was in sthula-sharira and meditation or all.
Yes.
Is it possible to continue that thing, or it just stops and there until another sthula-sharira?
Yeah,
comes?
actually you will be forced to continue if you have got enough storehouse, enough store of good samskaras. You can't help it. Lord Krishna said, Purva abhyasena tenaiva kridihi avasya. Avasya means you have no freedom, you have no option. You will be prompted, you will be forced, you will be helpless. And you will be helpless, you will be forced to continue your spiritual practices.
Even in sukshma-sharira?
Not in sukshma-sharira, when you are born again.
But what happens in sukshma-sharira? Will I be doing some
Sukshma-sharira,
japa again?
Sukshma-sharira doesn't operate alone without a sthula-sharira. Sukshma-sharira doesn't operate alone. It is a subtle personality that we inherit when we are born again. Because after all, destruction happens only to sthula-sharira or gross body. Tendencies and impressions are coming from another source.
Right.
Where do they come from? Say a hypnotist or psychologist may not be able to take you beyond the years of memory formation. Beyond that, there are many ideas, many experiences that people go through which cannot be explained in the light of experiences belonging to this life. If hypnotist can take you through regression to the point when you started conscious actions which created memories in the system. So he will, as a hypnotist through suggestions, will be able to take you back to those years, childhood years, not beyond that. But in fact, there are cases, and not one but many cases, where some of the phobias and obsessions have been solved by
Previous births.
by interpreting it in the light of previous birth experiences. So in psychological counseling, when you are convinced of the nature of the problem is almost gone.
Right.
It's not like cancer. You understand the cancer is not remedied. But in many psychological problems, when the patient is explained the true nature, then a mystery is solved, so far as he is concerned, and he feels a kind of relaxation. That actually, this was applied by Edgar Casey, but he carried too far, and it became more of a mockery, because he wanted money, so he wanted telling people, everyone, you were Jesus Christ in previous life. You don't want to deny the fact you are Jesus Christ. So people started giving more money if he told a patient was in front of us in previous life. Or some grant, or maybe one of the wives of Henry VIII. That was his normal. You remember? So many mansions and all that. So he went too far, but actually some of his early statements were very sensible and go entirely with the teachings of Buddhism and also Vedanta. You know that is in Buddhist tradition there is the 12-link chain of 12-link. You know, many of these obsessions and phobias and problems can be solved. In fact, multiple personality problems can be solved if patients can be explained. This must be a sufficient cause. You may have done something, you do another action, good action, and the patient feels by a counteraction he has neutralized the effects of wrong thing that he might have done in the past, which caused this problem. So that conviction, you know, psychology very often it operates at the conviction level. So when the patient has a wrong idea, a wrong conviction, it can be neutralized by giving a positive counterpoint to him.
Somebody, I read a book just like what you were saying. Yeah. It's in a different context. The book was written by a physician in Florida. The name of the book was Many Master, Many Lives. And one of his patients was Catherine, and he was having tremendous amount of phobias and pains in his body. And this doctor, he used this, past life regression technique, hypnotism, and he took her back to up to 86 lives. And some things that he then says the same thing. What are you saying?
Yeah.
I'm surprised that he says that many of her problems are because of what she had earlier. And the second thing that she concluded that the nature of relationship that he used to have different persons really, and it is that same. That was he was enmity with a certain person. Looks like the same person is in this birth, but with a different relationship. But the same enmity continues. A good relationship. Somebody was his professor, Catherine's professor, very friendly, and now in this life his father.
Now, any other question? Any other questions?
So, Swamiji, what are you saying? Like bad samskaras, so they can be corrected by good actions in this life?
Bad samskaras are the residual effects of bad actions. Actually, bad undesirable actions. So, good actions will create good samskaras. Human, our chittam or mind system, the mental system is like a bag. It has got a huge store of good and bad samskaras. When good samskaras dominate, they outnumber the bad samskaras, then conflicts or anxieties all will increase. So they will decrease if we alter the balance by doing actions which will create good samskaras. So that's why even if you have nothing else to do, if a person goes on doing good actions, those good actions will eventually will have an effect on our mind.
So the mind becomes shuddha, the purity of mind, how that is achieved, is that?
Purity of mind is nothing but when mind is completely freed, emptied of negativity, negative samskaras. That state is actually what we call purity of mind. In different language, from a different perspective, Vritti Nirodha is what the term used in yoga tradition. See.
So bad sanskaras won't pop up in the mind when the mind becomes totally still.
That's what. Yeah.
Swamiji, this happens quite often for me when I'm reading these texts.
Yeah.
Things are presented like if you do this first, then this will happen, and then this will happen. And it seems like from experience, you need to do a little bit of all of it at the same time, and it's more like a spiral than a staircase.
Yeah.
That you're really, you just have to keep revisiting things, and it's a little bit easier the next time, and then, I don't know, it's not like, if you shift your priorities, then you'll be able to have sense control.
Yeah.
Well, you sort of have to start having sense
Yeah.
control to shift your
Yeah, yeah,
priorities.
yeah.
You know? I mean,
No.
does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, as a rejoinder to this, I shall describe another aspect in practical spiritual life. See, when we start any spiritual practice, meditation, japa, or even prayer, or even reading a good book which feeds our mind with good ideas, immediately, if you are doing for the first time in your life, then what happens? Another personality, a secondary personality, a higher personality, a higher you begins to emerge in front of us. I was discussing this is Shankaracharya's commentary on Vyasa's commentary, discussing this morning. A higher you, higher I begin to emerge in my mind. But that is right now very weak. And when we close the book, it is no more there. But if we continue doing spiritual practices, by reading every day, by discussing with others, by praying, meditation, then the secondary personality, it grows in stature. Its voice, its influence becomes stronger and stronger. But still there will be conflict. Very often, we may fall back to the previous personality that we identified with before we started spiritual practices. But as we intensify our spiritual practices, the secondary higher personality, it becomes more and more dominant, and proportionately the previous one becomes, it recedes the background. So any kind of spiritual activity will strengthen the secondary personality. When that secondary higher personality becomes more and more dominant, then we can read a spiritual book without any conflict. You'll be able to pray, meditate better and better. You will feel no conflict within. And also, another thing, we feel at home when we are practicing spiritual sadhanas. Very often, conflict arises when we don't feel at home with what we are doing. So when you are praying, you feel this is my natural activity. This is my natural, spontaneous, real nature. And then when you look back, you feel that the previous personality, which actually resisted when you first started spiritual practices, that personality is no more very visible. So when the secondary personality, when we succeed in identifying ourselves with this higher secondary personality, then conflicts will be almost gone. So if you try to analyze, or if you try to classify or organize our spiritual life into 1, 2, 3, it doesn't happen that way.
No.
Because you cannot have a GPS system for our thoughts and mind. Because we don't know how our mind is going to react, what thoughts are going to emerge in our mind. So we should not threadbare analyze thoughts and ideas and attitudes. It will be terribly disturbing and disruptive. On the other hand, when we try to concentrate on the secondary personality, you feel that we identify ourselves more and more with the higher thing. And intensity and desire to progress in spiritual life will make this progress, evolution, easier and easier. That's what happens.
If there are no other questions, may I ask another one, Swami?
Yeah.
Swami, when you said this snake, snake is not there. It's the rope, right?
Yeah,
The
yeah.
rope is the Brahman, right?
No, rope is not. I tell
Rope
you,
is the reality, right?
rope is the empirical reality.
Empirical reality.
Snake is only a conceptual reality.
Right. So,
Yeah.
so that is the
Yeah.
okay, conceptual. So the two things. One is avidya,
Yeah,
is the reason we are seeing.
Yeah.
And second is when you said light comes,
yeah.
then we see that it is
Rope.
the rope, right? Then that light is actually the realization of that comes to the mind and the soul, right?
Yeah.
That unless that realization comes,
Yeah.
this avidya doesn't go away.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah. Actually,
That's
light.
little
Yeah,
confusing. Yeah.
that's true.
Yeah.
Light is actually the removal of all wrong notions. Light corresponds, bringing light in the dark, semi-dark room corresponds to removal of wrong notions
Wrong.
through reading the right scriptures, through contemplation, through meditation, through continued spiritual effort. You get the right notion as to what we actually are. That corresponds to bringing light. Because in Vedanta there is an interesting discussion which is very logical. That is, light doesn't reveal rope. Light only removes darkness that stood in the way of your realizing the fact is a rope. So light has nothing to do with the rope. Light has only to do with the function of removing darkness. So in Vedanta, it takes a lot of intellectual and spiritual courage, logical courage. Shankaracharya says, goddess and goddesses and scriptures and books cannot give you realization on a platter. It is something you have to do yourself. There are many verses which I didn't discuss here. He says, if you are the patient, you have to take the medicine. Otherwise, the Vivekachudamani says, somebody else taking the medicine won't cure your problem. Even God cannot take drink medicine and solve your problem. You have to do yourself. Because you are coming back to your home. Rather, you are throwing away the wrong notion that you are away from your home.
Nothing is free.
Your true nature is, you self-discover your true nature. So here, the light doesn't reveal rope. The light's function is limited to the role of removing darkness. The scriptures, incarnations and teachers and books, their role is limited to the function of removing the obstacles that stand in your way of realizing your true nature. And that makes a lot of sense, It takes a lot of courage. In fact, the reason why Swamiji was so successful in this country was, so when Swamiji came, you have to remember, it was Darwinism, then anti-creationist ideas, and radical humanism, and again the humanism related to the post-Marxian, Engelsian thoughts, So I don't think about Soviet Union or China. You did insult to Karl Marx to connect him with Soviet Union and China. Marx was a great humanist. Nothing to do with Joseph Stalin. What I mean to say is, when Swamiji came, especially the east coast of the United States, there was still a very hardcore intellectuals who were looking eagerly to Europe and observing and discussing, loudly discussing. You can hear that when you read Swami Vivekananda in American newspapers. New discoveries, fine. So Swamiji could create such an impact because he told Americans, it is something that is yours. It is not something that priest gives you. It is yours, your birthright. And for you, if you turn, if you make an effort, you can achieve it. It is this boldness that made him Swamiji so successful. That's an important thing. Okay. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.